Welcome to Mommy Has Questions. Motherhood is hard, but it's even harder when the system is stacked against us. We're four moms who have come together from the big city and the suburbs to call out societal norms that make being a woman feel like a struggle every day, and to spark the change we all need. If you're tired of feeling unsupported and you've got questions, you're not alone. This is your village.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mommy Has Questions. Today, we're talking about a very important topic. Do we really truly understand how high the stakes are for women who choose motherhood, especially when it comes to the workplace and our careers? The laws have evolved over the years, but culture hasn't really caught up. The majority of the workplace still operates on norms designed around an ideal worker who has no caregiving responsibilities. And I think we've all seen that in play. And that means that if a woman chooses motherhood, she often has to advocate for herself at every stage before pregnancy, during pregnancy, on maternity leave, and especially when she returns. And that's why today's episode is so important because we're shifting the conversation. This isn't just about surviving motherhood in the workplace, this is about setting women up for career success if they choose motherhood and naming the strategies, protections, and mindset shifts that they need in order to navigate the system that's was not built for them. And there is no one better to have this conversation with than today's amazing guest. We are joined by someone who has built their entire career around fighting for mothers. We are joined by the incredible Daphne Delvaux. Hi, Daphne.
Hello.
Hello. So, a little bit about Daphne. She founded the first and only law firm dedicated entirely to mothers' rights, and she's become one of the most powerful legal educators for women navigating pregnancy, postpartum, and the workforce. Daphne is a national advocate and a feminist thought leader who has built an entire movement around educating mothers on their rights. Daphne is an employment lawyer and a trial attorney, and she's also the creator of the Mamattorney, a platform on a mission to educate mothers on their rights at work and teach them how to advocate for their needs, including extended maternity leave, financial benefits, telework, flexibility, more breaks, pumping protections, and more, all without sacrificing their career goals. Sounds amazing, right? So Daphne encourages mothers to celebrate their motherhood as a superpower and to proudly and professionally seek the accommodations they need instead of suppressing their own needs and their baby's needs. So, all that said, Daphne, we are so lucky to have you today.
Thank you.
Daphne, you've seen firsthand the gap between what the law allows and how culture actually treats mothers. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what originally pulled you into this work?
Thank you so much for this beautiful introduction and just for this gathering of incredible women and mothers here. I was working as an employment lawyer, but more as a generalist in a traditional employment law trial attorney firm. And I just noticed that when it came to mothers, we weren't really serving them in the way that they needed to be served because they just have different needs. And we were losing a lot of them, even in the intake process, where just even before or after the first conversation, they just kind of checked out. And then when I became a mother, it became really clear to me why, because our interests really are a lot more kind of global and universal in the sense that we have to care about our children, our families, our mental health, and so many more factors that really don't go into our thought process before motherhood. And so I decided to really orient myself towards mothers as I was really understanding with a lot of humility and deep pain, and also just wonder and awe what it actually requires to walk this journey. I would say the first time I really had this moment was when I was in trial, and I was also a pumping mother. And during one of the breaks, a bottle of breast milk actually spilled over in the judge's kitchen, all over her sandwich. And I just looked at the sandwich and I was like, wow, how did I get here? And I had to then throw out the sandwich, get another sandwich, but I hadn't looked at what kind of sandwich it was. And so I ended up just buying a random sandwich, hoping that that was the right sandwich. And no one ever said anything, but it was just, there were these absurd moments, or like sitting topless in what was called the war room, which was the defense attorney's office. And this is where they plotted their strategy. And I'm just sitting there pumping and I'm in the war room, and just these absurd moments where you're just like, this is strange.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking to a lot of men about my boobs, not in this language, of course. I mean, we're all just women here, but just about expressing breast milk and lactation, what it's required, and them just asking me if it could wait, and then me having to explain the physiology of what it actually requires. It's like, no, it can't wait. Just like you can't wait to go to the bathroom, and then like, can you pump in the bathroom? And they said, only if you eat your sushi there, Bert. And just like
Mhm.
all of these strange moments where I'm like, oh my goodness, it's so hard. And while I was also really noticing in my work just how we really need to serve in a different way when it comes to motherhood. So I just decided to create a whole business around it.
Jamie, tell us a little bit about your own working mother journey, if you've
Well,
had any moments like
I
that.
would say nothing humbles you more than being topless in your workplace and doing something that you know is right and you're supposed to be doing and you're pumping in a place that just feels so foreign to that moment. And yeah, finding different spaces for that. Those are huge wake up call reality checks. And Daphne, the work that you do is so incredible. And what I think we continue to have to bridge the gap on is connecting people with the knowledge, right? And helping women to recognize and understand that they have rights and they have support and they have things that they can ask for, but they've got to ask for them because people, men and women, just don't even know. They don't recognize. You can't know often unless you're in it and living it, which is what's so hard about it, I think, sometimes.
I think that is such an important point, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so grateful for just this reflection because there's two battles here. There's the battle to make sure we understand what our rights are. And that is a whole thing in and of itself, which I support women with. But then there's a second part, which is actually asking for the thing. And that's a whole other challenge. So you have these kind of two levels of mastery, and my goal is really, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but at least make an informed decision. Because what I see over and over again is that mothers quit or push through their limits or just kind of give up, not even knowing that they have options. And even if the options don't feel safe or comfortable or something you want to use right now, like just knowing what the law can do for you can give you a sense of like, I see a roadmap now instead of just seeing a bunch of jumbled up acronyms and policies. Or another thing that I really rebel against, there's a lot of rhetoric about motherhood online, in a sense that we have no rights. Like we often hear about that motherhood in America is terrible. There's no rights. There's no support. While I kind of like energetically agree with that, as a lawyer, I always have to be like the legal police. Actually, we always have to be that person. Like, actually, there's but quite a lot of rights that you can rely upon during and after pregnancy that give you, in a sense, what it does, it gives you special treatment. That's really what it is. So the laws around accommodations, around flex work, remote work, extending maternity leave, it is really honoring mothers as being in a protected category that deserve extra reverence, respect. And that's a beautiful thing. And we really don't pause and think like, hey, actually, we do have this whole system set up that respects and honors, but we just like shit all over it.
Well, and Daphne, why it's so hard, I think sometimes for women in the workplace to do that is because we have been taught our entire careers not to be different,
Mhm.
right? We have, in order to be successful in a patriarchal workplace, which is all workplaces, you have to do it like the men, right? And so asking for exceptions or asking for differences or putting yourself out there as being different is like shunned upon because that's not what's going to get you to the corner office if that's what you're striving for, or the next promotion or the next raise or whatever it is that you're kind of working towards in your career. And so all of a sudden you hit this moment where the only way for you to continue doing what you're doing and to step into this role of motherhood is to suddenly flag yourself as special and different. And
Mhm.
Yeah,
that's
it's very
so
uncomfortable.
hard, so
Yeah.
hard to
Yeah.
come to terms with.
And we don't like this concept of special treatment because we like concepts, even in the context of the workplace, we think of equality and fairness. But what maternity law actually says is, hey, we are not the same. If you're creating life, you are not the same. And I think it's very hard for people to digest that sometimes because they're actually really focused on women's equality. But mothers' rights is actually not about women's equality. It's about a whole other set of rights, which is like we actually do deserve more protection because we are doing this life giving, life affirming work. But folks, including ourselves, managers, coworkers, everyone's going to digest that differently.
Mhm.
And and of course, like even the concept special treatment is extremely uncomfortable even for me to say. But really that is what it means is that you get to, for example, be excused from policy. So for example, everyone has to be there at 8 a.m. You, if you're experiencing morning sickness, you get to be excused from that. And then of course you've got to really recognize that even the rule that everyone has to be there at 8 a.m. is so unhealthy. So, yes, if you have a chance to be excused from that, you should absolutely take that opportunity. And it is so hard when everyone is in the left lane for you to go in the right lane because you will be left behind. Like you're
Mhm.
going to miss things. You're going to miss things. You're going to be, there's going to be this discomfort of everyone is doing all these things and I'm not really fully a part of it. And then you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice and say, and this is there's no judgment here in terms of like what the choice should be, but you have to make a choice as to do I stay in the left lane and push myself because I really care, or do I allow myself to go in the right lane, take it slower, and trust that the chips will fall how they fall and that my career is long enough to kind of withhold this shaking? Because in the end, you have another like 40 years to drive in the left lane. Like this is a very short period of time in the kind of the long arc of your career. And we get really shaken because like, oh my God, I've been like going at it. What's going to happen if I temporarily stop doing that? And we kind of forget to zoom out and realize like, oh, I actually maybe this is good for me. Maybe
Mhm.
the scenery's nice on the side. Maybe everyone
Mhm.
else can join me here, you know?
Mhm.
And so this is where we get a little bit stuck. And again, it's not there's no wrong choice, but you have to choose. And if you're going to choose to stay in the left lane, what it means is that you will essentially have to suppress a lot of your discomfort and pain and needs. And then if you go in the right lane, you're going to have to express things and verbalize what you need to those who have the power to pay you. Like that's really scary, especially when it comes to healthcare or benefits or when you have other folks who are dependent on you. That's a really, really scary thing to do. So there's kind of no easy way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I wish we could be in the middle lane, but that's not an
Yeah.
option.
Totally. But it's such a good analogy too that you applied, like the left and the right lanes. And I
Mhm.
talk about this often in the women's groups that I speak in and work in different corporate spaces. And I often say to women, especially young women, we are consistently taught to believe that all of our careers should be up and to the right. This is how life is. And while that can be true for men, that is just fundamentally not true for women. Our lives are not up and to the right. They are cyclical, just as we are cyclical beings in general. And so once you can kind of let go of that up and to the right mentality and start seeing the flow exactly that you're talking about, that careers are really long and these moments that we might take in them to care give, whether that's for our kids or for elderly parents or for whomever that's in our lives that needs our support. It really helps you to readjust your expectations and recognize that there are times to be in the left lane and to push and to go at it really hard. And then there are times when you can downshift into the right lane. And there's lots of layers and levels in that downshift too, which is also, I think, really interesting to go into in terms of what reentry looks like for women if they've completely left the lanes to step 100% into motherhood, but they will then want to come back.
Mhm. Like myself. I will say, just jumping in with, a little bit of my own experiences. Unfortunately, I felt like a big disconnect between policy and then practice in terms of the way I was treated after I was pregnant, gave birth, had, two kids. And there were a lot of instances where opportunities had been passed up because of the limitations of childcare, et cetera. So how do we reconcile with that? For me, it didn't make sense to continue on the way things were continuing on. But how would you navigate that with somebody who is contemplating reentering the workforce after having had that pause for motherhood, essentially?
Well, to really embrace motherhood as an incredible opportunity for skill building. And there's two parts here because just among us women, we can recognize how powerful it is to be a mother and how valuable those skills are in the workplace. And when it comes to recruiting, I do caution discretion in a sense that I've seen this movement of like put mother on your resume and lead with motherhood. And I'm a little bit worried about that in a sense, like, I don't think we're there yet, also because the recruiters are usually AI systems now, and they don't even really work for your company. So often when I say like, you should wait a layer, and then the woman will say, well, I don't want to work for a company that doesn't respect and appreciate that. And then I say, okay, well, recruiter doesn't work for your company either. So wait at least 1 or 2 rounds before you bring those issues up. And then often a question I receive is, how do I ask about flexibility and all of these issues during the interview process without saying, oh, I'm here fishing for mom things, right? And I think my recommendation is to always ask about these issues in a list of a different variety. So not just asking about flexibility, but also asking about healthcare, pension, and that it's like one of the things in the list. You can also ask for the handbook, so you can better understand the company ethos, and also ask for things like what kind of extracurriculars are there. And when it's only golf, you'll know that that's like a bro club. But if there's
Yeah.
family events or and baby showers, you'll know that it's like more interesting. But I think mainly about like the mental block is to just be really unapologetic about your experience and trust that the right employer will really value
Mhm.
the experiences that you've built, and that even staying connected to the workplace in any way or being a part of an organization is enough. It doesn't have to be, oh, I was like doing full-time work all the time, but you can share just about all of the other things that were organized. I mean, even within the school context, there's so much organization.
Mhm.
And so really approaching it without fear and just trusting that, once you put yourself out there and you declare like, this is what I'm going to do, there is boundless opportunities and they will present themselves to you. But it starts with actually claiming it, claiming that you want it, claiming that you want to find a new match. It's like dating, right? On the dating apps, there's so many folks, and it's a little bit just, okay, we're now screening them and they're screening us, but I have to trust that there's going to be a match.
I want to go back to the point you made about when you raise some of these things in interviews or in your search process and how you approach that. And I think what's important for women to understand, and I'm speaking from a place of being a negotiator. I was a broker for 15 years. I still negotiate. That's all I do is negotiate deals. And this is really coming to mind right now because I'm literally in the middle of a negotiation. The deal's falling apart because of one thing that we didn't talk about. And here's what happens is sometimes we have to go down further the path in negotiation before we get to all the answers we need. So asking about the supports that we might get as a mom or for family or things like that. And we have to be comfortable with the fact that we might take an interview process very, very far before we can really feel comfortable asking some of those questions or getting that answer. And we also might ultimately get answers we don't want to hear, and the deal's going to die. And we have to be okay with that too. And I think sometimes for us as women, we want to get everything buttoned up and figured out right at the beginning. Like we want to know all the things. We want to have all the answers. We want to be able to make a clear, evaluation of what we're looking at. We don't want to waste anyone's time to do something that might not work for us at the end of the day. But sometimes there's just certain points within the process where it's appropriate to ask those things, like you say. And there's points where it's not, because you're talking to a recruiter, you're dealing with an AI agent that's like, isn't going to even really have the right answers for you, or isn't going to give the perspective from the company that it truly is. And so we have to be a little bit comfortable with discomfort in the ways that we approach that. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be getting those answers before we are making a decision on the process.
Tiff, you know how we're all busy moms carrying a mental load that feels like 12 tabs open on Google? And then your kid does something so cute that you want to freeze it forever, not just as a photo, but actually capturing the moment.
I know exactly what you mean. And sometimes you want to capture more than just a photo. You want to capture what is truly happening in the moment and not forget the meaning behind the photo.
Well, now there's an app to do exactly that. Poppy is the beautifully designed photo app that lets you add voice notes to your photos so you can tell the story behind the smile in seconds.
Yep. Now you can capture the moments that matter effortlessly with Poppy, the voice note memory app for modern moms. Download on iOS or tap our show notes and use our promo code Mommy Has Poppy for 3 months free at checkout.
I wanted to dive in a little bit into the juxtaposition between working for a really large corporate organization that has process and rules and regulations and structure and HR teams all in place who have done this before or figured this out, or there's resources available, or there's people in your company who have already gone through the process and have modeled certain behavior that you can kind of tap into, versus being at a company that might be very small or even mid-size, where they just haven't had to address or deal with some of these things that you might be raising as a mother in the workplace, and or may not even have policy in place for that. And how do you manage that and approach that process?
I'm actually going to turn this around because I see often this assumption that the larger institutional employers have seamless processes and administration, and then the smaller companies are kind of clueless. And what I just want to say is that it's really great to work for a small company that has all of these holes because you get to fill them. You get to actually write policy. You get to actually lead that. You actually get to say, all right, well, I guess I'll project manage this. And what you get with the large institutional employers is they have a very set way of doing things. They usually have corporate lawyers working for them that are looking for every possible way to kind of screw over the employee so that they can protect the employer. And when you work for a large institutional employer, you're going against teams of extremely smart people that are incentivized to protect your employer. And when you work for a smaller or medium company, you get to be the one that really brings everyone together. It's great, actually. I created the maternity leave policy in our law firm where I used to work, even though it was an employment law firm, but no one had ever gone through pregnancy.
Mhm.
And I was teaching my boss things, and it was awesome. And it is frustrating to go to your small employer boss and they don't know anything. But this actually brings me to a really important point is that we shouldn't go to them as a source for information about our baby. It's just not
Mhm.
the right place to go. It's actually a very imbalanced dynamic. It's actually quite unsafe for you to
Mhm.
outsource that power. Project managing, you spending time with your baby and you having everything you need for your health, that is your job. Outsourcing that to your employer would be implicitly saying that you trust your employer with your baby's well being. And that is a dangerous move, which is why in the large organizational employers, even though they have process and policy and administration, they're going to have a certain way that they want to deal with taking care of your baby. And that can be quite limiting. And when there's a lot of policy that's set, it can be hard to kind of shake that up. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. Big companies are really good about promoting family friendly policy, but actually implementing it and actually walking the walk is always going to depend on the executive team and how
Mhm.
they're modeling it. And if they're also going to pick up their kids, also taking actual sick day instead of, I'm sick, I'm working from home, which is not actually a sick day.
Mhm.
And so it's going to depend so much on just the tone that's being set at the top and the cadence and the rhythm. And I find with small and medium employers, there's so much more power to actually create that tone, to actually set the stage. But yet, the most important thing I want to share is even with large employers, just kind of flowing with the policy, flowing with the system, you want to look out for that. You don't want to assume that just because it is so ironed out and just kind of mass produced that it is solid. Even with these large institutional employers, I see massive issues. Like I had to sue the city of LA
Wow.
over their maternity leave policy that they were applying on a mass scale. Like this is everywhere. And often the folks put in charge of these issues are administrators.
Mhm.
Got to keep in mind HR is not legally trained. They may have had a certification at some point. They may be very proactive and take initiative in keeping abreast of employment law, but they didn't go to law school, like
Mhm.
really learning how to think like a lawyer and analyzing and really problem solving like a lawyer is a very unique skill, which is why it's expensive and long and a huge pain in the ass. So entrusting your HR to act like a lawyer is just not even fair to them because you're giving them this really big task that you can't ask of someone who is really burdened with so many responsibilities. It's a really tough job to do. The point I want to make is whether you work in a small, medium, or large employer, project managing your baby, maternity leave, pregnancy is your job.
That's an
Such
incredible point.
Yes, exactly. Feel like that for me is just a huge mindset shift that I didn't have at all when I first got pregnant. And mind you, like I was working for a smaller health communications agency that worked with the Centers for Disease Control. And I thought this, of course, they're going to be all about the babies and all about the mother's health and like actually care. And that was the furthest thing from the truth, unfortunately. But like you said, Daphne, after my first pregnancy, was able to help rewrite the maternity leave policy. So you do have a little bit of leeway with the smaller companies, but it does take that self advocacy to get there. And I wish so badly that somebody had told me that you need to be your own advocate. People aren't going to care about you and your baby the way that you do.
It's not a reasonable expectation to expect of your employer. That's for our mama group. That's for our family. That's for a partner. And sometimes I see women come to me and they say, oh, I announced my pregnancy at work and my boss wasn't celebratory. And I'm like, it's not really where we go for that. Like we
Right.
can try to implement it, but the workplace in the end is going to be a place where we're paid for a certain service. And what a pregnancy announcement is, it's like, hey, I'm going to have to stop doing that for a little while. Sorry, guys. Like that's really what it is. And it's best to be just realistic about that. But you can create an absolute opportunity here because what is so beautiful about motherhood and pregnancy is that they're going to have to think about not having you there. And that's really scary for a lot of employers because you're really fucking good at your job. And so what I really like doing with the women during pregnancy is really showcasing how amazing you are and really listing out all the success, everything they do all the time, and then showing their employer like, look, this is everything I do. You don't even know what I do because employers never know what we actually do because they're busy doing their jobs. And then really being active and proactive with making sure the right structure and system is set up to replace you and collaborating with that because we just assume our employer is going to deal with all of that. And the way to really protect your own work is to be really proactive and really think about, I care about this job. I care about this project. I care about this mission. If I'm just going to step away, I really have no protection for all of this to stay intact. We have a protection when it comes to our job, but not when it comes to our work. And that's a really, really important distinction to understand. Like your job is going to be there, but what happens to your work is kind of up to how busy your employer was and how much staffing they had to support you. And when you can be the one really leading that and saying, I care so much, not only can it propel you into a leader, but you're really showing your employer how valuable you are. And then coming back and saying, I'm sure y'all miss me because this is how great I am. Like we got to turn this entirely upside down. And we're acting out of this kind of narrative of, oh my God, I'm so scared. I'm so scared. And let me just tell you something as someone who's been in this work for 15 years, they're so much more scared of you. A pregnant employee, it's really terrifying for them. So you're actually helping them when you go to them and say, this is what I need, and here's how we're going to do it. Because the most frustrating thing for everyone is when there is ambiguity, when there is confusion, when there's a lack of clarity, when there's this uncomfortable, what do you need? I don't know. I want to help you, but you're not telling me, but I see you're struggling. This weird place where people aren't being honest and truthful and transparent about what they need. And that's actually where I see a lot of the legal issues.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, you didn't say the thing. I know you needed the thing, but you didn't say the thing. And then now look at where we are and you came to me too late. We can try to damage control, but you've got to say how you feel. You've got to say what you need because you have to give your employer an opportunity to support you. And if we don't do that and we just kind of check out or assume the worst, then we're not really writing the new story. We're actually complicit in the old story. And this takes guts. Like, I'm not going to lie, this is a hard thing to do, but it is the ultimate clarifier because this is a chance for you to really see what your employer is all about and whether this is going to be a place where you want to stay long term. Because there's nothing like a pregnancy that's going to show you, wow, they really don't care or they really do care. Nothing else will do that. So it's such a gift. Motherhood is such a gift to your career because it illuminates your path. And when you're at a place that doesn't respect you, honor you, value you, you're going to learn that real quick during your pregnancy. And then you can think about, okay, now I know that. Now I can make a move. So, yeah.
It's you're so spot on in that. And taking the power back, recognizing you have the ability to take the power back and to own it, it actually benefits everybody. I really want to move into talking about when you've downshifted so far out of the right lane, you are on the side of the road.
Yeah. Just hanging out. The forest,
Because
awesome. Just feral.
You're doing a million other things, right? Like it's not like you're sitting there with your feet up, eating bonbons, watching soap operas, right? Or maybe you are. Good for you if you are, but you're doing a million other things. Now you're ready to get
probably
back.
merged into another road that's even
Yeah,
busier.
that's a nice high road.
Yeah.
You've left the highway. But now you're ready to merge back into the lanes, so to speak. And you're just totally at a loss. And, I don't know necessarily, Daphne, if there's law that we can talk about around what that looks like, but maybe more it's like an interpersonal conversation on how are you guiding women in that way in their journey and in their process.
Is this one coming back from leave?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So this is
Or
a
coming
danger
back
zone.
from stepping away
Yeah.
completely too.
Yeah, those are two different conversations. I think the first one we covered, but the when it comes to coming back from leave, this is a very, very vulnerable stage
Hmm.
because during pregnancy, most employers, if they're not completely clueless, they will be pretty careful with a pregnant woman. But when the woman comes back from leave, they assume that special protection is no longer there, and that is not true. Mothers continue to have protections after they come back from leave during their postpartum period.
Mm.
Postpartum is not super defined, but it's like, let's say, like solid year.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask.
So,
Still
yeah,
postpartum. my children,
yeah. I mean,
my children are 6 and
if
8.
you can get your doctor to go along, it's probably maybe you can make it maybe like 18 months. But either way, when you come back from work, this is when employers start to often get a little sneaky. They're like, well,
Hmm.
we put Mark in your job and Mark's doing a good job. It wouldn't be fair to him. So we're going to put you in this job. That is illegal. Like they do actually have to put Mark in another job or create a job for you that is similar, like almost identical to the job you left. And this
Wow.
I
sounds
didn't know that.
nonsensical because within capitalism, you assume like, well, um, now Mark has been trained. Mark is doing this job. She decided to have a baby, right? That's the bullshit we always hear. So why is it Mark's problem that she now came back and wants her job back, wants her seat back? But the law says no. You got to actually give her seat back. That's what job protection means. That's what we're talking about. Is that you
Mm.
get to take a leave of absence depending on your state rights and federal rights. You get to then enjoy that without worrying about your job. That's what it means to have a protected leave of absence. And so when you come back, you gotta get Mark booted out of that job or create a parallel job. And that is where a lot of employers, because it is completely not conducive with capitalism, they're very confused. Because now
Mm.
suddenly they're like, what are we gonna do with Mark? Right?
Yeah.
For Mark, it's just been, and so it's like, do we keep both Mark and the mom? And so this is something that they have to figure out. And it can be expensive to suddenly have two people, or do we let Mark go? And that doesn't feel fair to Mark. So again, this is where we just see so many cases. And then we get into the issue of postpartum accommodations because the accommodation rights aren't done either. You get to then ask to work remotely. If you have, let's say you have anxiety, postpartum anxiety, you get to ask for more time. You get to ask for time for postnatal appointments. You get to ask for flexibility, just like during pregnancy. And so the mom comes back, already had her time off, and then maybe asking for more things. And the employer's like, wait, I thought this was done. And the mom feels uncomfortable because she feels like she's kind of exceeded the generosity. And like, here I'm
Hmm.
asking for my pumping rights, which is a whole other set of rights, by the way. Like
Nah.
I haven't even covered the big categories of rights in law because I have all of that in my book that's coming out or in my membership, and it would take a long time. But either way, there's all of these sets of rights that you have when you come back to work. So re-entering requires you to first know those categories and really know how they interact and apply to you. And then kind of putting them on notice that you know your rights. And you don't have to act on it, but just using the word like, I'm excited to be reinstated to my job. That in and of itself really showcases that you understand that you have a reinstatement right. You don't have to go in with like, the law says blah, 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 even though
Uh-huh.
I sometimes advocate that. But just like, yeah, I'm excited to be reinstated to my job. I'm excited to receive the benefits of my pumping protections.
Yeah.
It will really help me um, succeed as a working mother. Seeing where education is needed. Again, not assuming that your employer knows all of this. This is so confusing.
Or
This
your
is
boss.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got to then say, these are the rights. I've been looking into this, and yeah, I think that's what the most important thing with reentry. And then it's very hard to reenter, and a lot of women want to quit. I wanted to quit. What happened for me was there were a lot of waves. Like I wanted to quit. I didn't want to quit. I wasn't
Hmm.
sure. There was ambiguity. There was confusion. And I was just riding these
Hormones.
waves, and I was like, what do I really want to quit? And I'm really glad I didn't. One, because that cute baby became a toddler who's a tyrant. And
Yeah.
I'm really happy that he was in preschool with like other children and
Mhm.
professional educators because that went way beyond my qualification. And secondly, because I don't actually want to quit my work. Now,
Mhm.
after my
Mhm.
second baby, I did shift into becoming self-employed and having my own business, but I still am glad I didn't quit. But it's such a rumbling, it's such a shaking. And when you expect it and you know, like, whoa, this next probably year is going to be very hard, it's easier to also keep your eye on the horizon instead of just being like, I can't do this. If you feel like I can't do this, you've got to again check into your rights because you may be able to go back on maternity leave or work from home or do something else to just kind of like take the pressure off where you have space and time to strategize and tend to yourself instead of just like full on quitting, which is also scary because then you have to think about what does that mean?
Mhm.
And so this is actually where there is a middle lane. Yeah. And so this is where you want to take that middle lane and say like, what about I return, but I do a ramp up schedule? I
Mhm.
work from home 2 days a week.
Mhm.
Or I do a ramp up schedule where I just slowly ramp up to 100%. I start at part time and then I go to 100%. Or I do come back, but this project you're going to give me more time. I'm going to need more time to
Mhm.
finish this project. So
Mm.
you want to try some of these things first. These are the accommodations. Then see how you feel. So, yeah, but I understand this instinct of like, this is terrible. I hate this because it is. Like
Mhm.
when you re-enter in the workplace, it feels violent. Like it feels so to your tender animal body. And I remember having to wake up early and I'm just like, what is this? And then sitting in
Yeah.
traffic and my boobs are hurting. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this is so wrong. And it is. Like, I don't want to minimize that or take away from that. And I also just want to say it's temporary.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like babies actually turn into toddlers very quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
I
you're
mean,
like, "Oh my god." They're
it's
yelling at
crazy.
me,
And
hiding
you're
in the
just a
bathroom.
totally different person afterwards, and that I think that's a hard shift to navigate as I had a question about all of these rights. I wish I had you in my ear while I was in the workplace. But so my company, while I was pregnant, was a company of less than 50 employees. Do those rights still apply to these smaller companies with less than 50 employees?
How many were there?
Around that time, we were probably around 35, 40, so close, but not
Yeah, they do.
hitting
So
that
the
mark.
Pregnant Workers Fairness Act I was referencing is a law that applies to those companies with 15 or more employees, and before that, we could use ADA, but it was a little harder, but we could still use it. And then state law also lowers the bar depending on where you're living. So, 50 employees is kind of the limit we think of for FMLA. And we just kind of assume that's like the law for any and all maternal right, and that's not true. Even if
Mm,
FMLA has, there's a way to get time off that is not FMLA. And then there's a way sometimes if you're lucky based on your state to have time off. And so we're so focused on FMLA being so shitty and unpaid
Mhm.
yes.
and exclusive and having all of these obstacles. And we're totally ignoring everything else that's right there.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so, yeah, this is again why I actually created my work because I saw all of these mommy blogs like replete with wrong legal information. And I'm like, can someone please give you the whole landscape? Because this is so unhelpful. And I agree, FMLA is super shitty, but it's just not the only law. We treat it as this like beacon, as this like
Mhm.
center
Mhm.
corner piece. To me, it's like a little afterthought when it
Yeah.
comes
Mm.
to like the world where I operate.
Wow.
And yeah, it's just, I mean, it's been around forever since 93. It's super old and it's like just the minimum. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
terrible.
It's
And
not
so,
the
yes,
I was gonna say
there
it's
are
not
other
the only
laws.
tool in our toolbox.
Yeah. And I think what it does is it creates a narrative that there's no options
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
there's no options for those in smaller employers. There's no options for those who work less than a year, don't have a year tenure, who work full time. And yeah, uh, I mean, I could talk about this all day about like we gotta decenter FMLA. That's the thing.
Yeah, and that we're not tied just to that there's more tools in our toolbox and that again to your point, we shouldn't be relying on our employers to dictate this. We really need to be going out and doing the work for ourselves to
Yeah.
understand what we have available to us.
Yeah. Because employers are also in this culture where we have this assumption that the only thing we have is FMLA. Like everyone thinks that. And so they act on it. And employers are busy doing their jobs. They're not busy reading random employment laws. Like, why would that's a really weird thing to do on your spare time.
Right.
So going to them and asking them these like high level employment law questions, like there's some sort of employment law ninja, it's just not the right source, and it's just setting them up to give you information they may not know, or they're scared. They'll give you no information. They'll say like, like, I don't know. And everyone's confused. Everyone hates each other. And then it all falls apart.
And this is
So I
why
think that
everyone needs to hire you to come in and help.
they definitely need to look into their rights. And that's something that I do offer. Because ideally, by the time they have to hire me, something is really off.
Gone
And
wrong.
and my work is really to prevent that from the get-go.
All right. So one question I do have is, we're talking about all these amazing rights that we have. And again, like I didn't know that we had these things. So one of the pieces that keeps coming to mind is how can we as women and as mothers advocate for ourselves fiercely enough to make change without being labeled as the squeaky wheel and without hurting our career necessarily, in order to get these rights that we are allowed to have?
Okay, great question. Here's what I want to say about that. I just want you to imagine whether Chad would feel bad asking for a medical leave for his hip replacement. Like he would just say that, He would just say that. He would be like, I need a hip replacement. Here's when I'm gonna be out. See y'all later.
Yeah. Yep.
And he would be really dramatic about it too. He wouldn't have to feed a baby every 2 hours after his surgery.
Yeah.
So the shamelessness that men approach this with, like, do you think employers and companies in general aren't using every legal loophole they can? Like when it comes to employers' rights, they push their rights so far, but we don't label them as like squeaky wheel. Yeah, squeaky wheel. So let's say a vendor doesn't respect a contract, they would sue them so quickly, like 5 minutes later, they would sue them for breach of contract. And we're so comfortable with that when it comes to the business setting. Like there's rules, there's process, there's enforcement. But when it comes to women and motherhood, we're so awkward because it's a little bit of, my goodness, how am I going to make sure it's not ruining my career? A few things I want you to keep in mind. You're just asking your employer to follow the rules. Like if you're going to ask for something, it is just what the law says. This is honestly law and order, really what it is. And it's almost, if you would let them get away with it, you're saying they can drive through the red light because I don't want to tell them that there's a red light. Actually, I'm just going to let them think that they're driving through a green light, even though that's dangerous. The other thing I want to say is this is about your baby. At all times, your baby's well-being and yours is more important than your employer's business operations. And lastly, again, I don't want to minimize that it may hurt your career, but there are non-retaliation rights for protections for these reasons. You may not be retaliated against for asserting your rights. And often it's actually worse when we don't, because we don't have any protections when we don't say anything. And then you still find yourself out of a job sometimes or overwhelmed. Then you have nothing to do. You have no recourse. And I think the main thing when it comes to soft skills, when it comes to how do I protect my career, is to actually loop this into your career. Like companies pay so much money for HR people, for administrators, for these leave companies they now use, which only use like AI. We didn't know that already. So if you can actually be the one who understands this and helps your company stay compliant, like that's the language you want to use. That's the language I used when this new law came out in California that extended maternity leave for bonding. And I emailed it to my boss and I said, I'm here to help you stay compliant. Here's all of these rules, blah, 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 blah. And he said, thank you. He said, thank you. That's what he said. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm like, actually, I'm also using it.
By the way. Yeah.
And so, yeah, those are some of the things.
Yeah.
That's
so
great.
What would be your top 3 recommendations or things that women should do before they become moms or before they decide to start this motherhood journey to help either get them educated or protect their careers, or what should they be paying attention to?
There's a mother who joined my program before she was pregnant. Like the moment she started thinking about children is when she joined. Her name's Michelle. She's amazing. And I just really respected that so much because usually women come to me after the shit hit the fan. It's like,
Mhm.
oh my God, I have to go back to work. My baby's not taking the bottle. I'm not
Mhm.
ready. I'm so stressed out. I'm crying all night. What do I do? And I'm like, I don't know. We didn't set you up. Well, I mean, there's stuff we can do, but it's going to be rushed and you're unprepared. And they just assumed, again, their employer, they outsourced all of that to their employer. And then they realize their employer, that's not their job. That's not their
Mhm.
job. And so, what we want to do is start really early with understanding our rights, even writing out your emails.
Mm.
Like writing out your email for when you go back to work, writing out your email for when you need lactation accommodations, writing it like in your first trimester so that you just have that peace of mind of like, I have my whole plan set up.
Mhm.
This is what I do when this happens. If I have a traumatic birth, this is what I do. If I have postpartum depression, this is what I'm going to do. You're just ready. You're just ready for it. You can create a whole roadmap. You can make a fantasy chart, get your partner involved. They like doing those things. So you just create this whole roadmap of eventualities, of
Mhm.
possibilities
Mm.
of what you might do.
Mhm.
And the next thing is to be kind of shameless and unafraid, you know? Like this is why we have rights. It's interesting because as you may see, like we spend a lot of time talking about how we have no rights and how it's terrible and how we need more rights. And I'm like, but use the ones you have. We're
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
going to get more if you don't use the ones you have. This is so
So true. So true.
exactly right. These policies come use it or lose
we
it
should have a
sometimes.
year paid maternity leave. And I'm like, you're not even using your unpaid maternity leave. Like,
Uh,
what are we doing?
yeah.
Um, and so we have to actually ask for the things where like where it matters and not just
Mhm.
being angry online. It doesn't do anything.
Yes.
Sorry, rant over.
No, I love it.
The last tip is to really understand, this is where I started with that, motherhood is the best thing that will happen to your career. Like it is absolutely, we really think it will just ruin our career forever. It will kneecap our ambitions. And there may be some temporary turbulence and it's going to feel uncomfortable and shaky. When you look at the long arc of your career, it is a good thing because
Mhm.
you're getting so much information about your employer, about yourself, about what you want to do. And there's nothing like coming back to a job. And then you have to do that job and you have to leave your baby for that job. And you're
Mhm.
like, this isn't worth it.
Mhm.
What is
Yeah.
it? And now you have to pay for childcare. So you're basically paying to work this shitty job you don't like.
Mhm.
There's just nothing like motherhood that will clarify that for you so that you can make informed decisions. It is a shortcut. So really trusting that even though it's scary, you want to really keep your eye on trusting yourself and trusting your own intuition and instincts. And I just also want to say that we are really inundated with terrible stories all the time when it comes. And this is also why I remember when I had like going to the birth classes and there was all of these ways your birth can go wrong and then had a bad birth the first time. And the second time I read all of those Ina May books, you know, about spiritual birth. And I had this like a very different birth because you're just opening up this whole other possibility, this whole other realm of like, what if it goes right? What
Mhm.
if things are just fine? You know? And I think we also have an opportunity and a responsibility that we don't tell all these terrible stories. My book is actually full of just moms who are fine,
Yeah.
you know? And just fine is great, honestly, when it comes to our work and motherhood. And I could tell stories all day long about all of these big injustices that happen to mothers. We could spend hours doing that. And it just is not going to do anything other than cause fear.
Mm.
Um, and a narrative that may cause you to act in a certain way. And instead, the narrative I want to share with you is things will be just fine. Like
Yeah.
things will be just fine. Doesn't really matter what happens to your job because you'll get the information you need.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Definitely. I want to give you space to do any plugs or drop anything that you're working on or you're excited about and about your business that you want to put out there to our listeners.
Oh, that's nice. Well, I have my book, and this is for everyone who is an employed mama. It's crowning in March of 26.
Yeah.
And then I have my entrepreneur program, Motherland, as well. And then I have an online program where you can also connect with me for a lower cost, and it would cost to hire me. And you can understand all of your accommodation rights and all of these things. So those are the three things. Yeah, I hope you come find me and hang out and just help me also share this message to decenter FMLA and all the things we talked about.
Yeah.
And
and then people should definitely find you on social media too, because you have an amazing platform on social.
yeah, you can
That's how
find me on
that's how
social
we met.
media where I call things out and talk shit all day.
I love it. We love your content every day.
And and we can give a full plug for the Motherland because, and among other things, we did participate in it as well, and it was amazing. And we're so
Thank
grateful
you.
for the space that you're creating and what you're building there. So that is a full endorsement of that program as well. We're really happy about that.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for co-creating with me.
Of course,
Of
we are so
course. No,
happy to be
thank
there.
you. And we will include all of Daphne's wonderful information in the show notes. And maybe you can be part of the next Motherland cohort as well. So if you want to find Daphne on social media to get amazing content every day, at the Mamattorney on Instagram. Daphne, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Seriously,
welcome.
I learned so much. I wish I had you years ago, but hopefully our listeners can send this information to pregnant mamas so that they can set themselves up for success in the workplace, especially. Thank you, everyone, because starting the conversation is part of the solution.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Daphne.
guys.
Thank you.
Mommy Has Questions is brought to you by, among other things, a vibrant moms collective that provides in-person programming and online content. For more information, please visit momsamongotherthings.com. This episode was produced by Christina Sansone and directed by Tiffany Hodges, with theme music by Juan Carlos Enriquez. Hit subscribe to catch our next episode and rate and review us to let others join our village.